Imagine waking up every day with this nagging feeling like you're meant for something more, like there's a fire inside you waiting to ignite. You want to do something big, something meaningful. You're ambitious. You've got ideas. And yet, somehow, you just can't seem to get going. You try, you plan, you set goals. But then, it's like you hit this invisible wall over and over again. You're stuck. It's not that you're lazy. You care. You're trying. But something inside feels frozen, like your drive and your motivation are pulling in opposite directions. Here's the crazy part. What if that feeling of being stuck isn't a flaw? What if it's not about discipline or mindset or hustle? What if it's actually a message? Something your unconscious mind is trying to tell you. Carl Jung, a Swiss psychoanalyst, believed that what we call being stuck might actually be a deep psychological process. He thought that inside each of us, there's this battle going on between what we consciously want and what we've unconsciously buried. Let me explain. Jung introduced this idea called the shadow. The shadow is basically all the parts of ourselves that we've rejected or ignored because they felt uncomfortable, unacceptable, or just too painful to deal with. And the more we ignore those parts, the more they mess with us from behind the scenes. Ever feel like there's a part of you holding you back, even when you're trying your hardest? That's the shadow. It's not sabotaging you for no reason. It's actually demanding to be seen. Think of it like this: trying to move forward while dragging an invisible anchor. On the outside, you're pressing the gas pedal, but internally, your foot's on the brake. That's what it feels like when your conscious goals and your unconscious wounds are pulling in opposite directions. So when you're in that weird state, driven but unmotivated, full of ideas but stuck, it's not because you're weak. It's because there's a deeper conflict inside you that hasn't been resolved yet. The shadow doesn't just show up as fear or insecurity. It can also show up as procrastination, burnout, or total exhaustion. It's your mind and body saying, "Hey, something deeper needs your attention before we can move forward." Jung believed that the only way to get truly motivated, the kind of motivation that lasts, is to stop chasing surface-level goals and start listening to the whole self, not just the part of you that wants to win, but the part that's been hurt, the part that's been ignored, the part that's afraid. Because until you bring those hidden parts into the light, they'll keep blocking your path, no matter how hard you push. So maybe the version of success you've been chasing isn't even really yours. Maybe it's something you were told to want. Maybe it's not aligned with who you actually are. And that's the real reason for the limbo. You're not failing. You're on the edge of transformation. Jung called it individuation. It's the process of becoming your full, true self, not just the polished version the world sees, but the whole package. That feeling of being stuck, it's not a dead end. It's the beginning of something real. So, how do we actually start moving through this stuck place? According to Jung, the first real step is something he called inner confrontation. Sounds intense, but here's what it means. It's about facing the parts of yourself you've been avoiding, not to judge them, not to fix them, but just to finally look at them with honesty and curiosity. Think about it. Every emotion you avoid, every uncomfortable thought you push away, every old memory you pretend didn't happen. All of that stuff doesn't disappear. It just gets buried. And while it's buried, it keeps draining your energy from the inside. That unexplained anxiety you feel before starting something important, that weird lack of motivation that kicks in right when you're about to make progress, those aren't random. They're signs, messages. Something inside you is asking, begging to be heard. Jung believed that we have to let the unconscious speak. One of the tools he suggested was called active imagination. It's basically letting your mind drift and bring up images, memories, even imagined conversations with parts of yourself. Then, instead of analyzing it or trying to shut it down, you interact with it. You write about it, you talk to it, you ask it questions. It's not about controlling your mind. It's about listening. And in that space, when you actually stop and listen, you start to uncover the real roots of your inner resistance. You might realize, for example, that your fear of success is tied to a time in childhood when being noticed led to pain. Or maybe you've been chasing big goals not because you really want them, but because they've always been a way to prove your worth to others. Or maybe the numbness you feel isn't because you don't care, it's grief, frozen over time. These realizations aren't always comfortable, but they're powerful, because once you see them, they stop running your life from the shadows. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." In other words, what you don't face inside yourself, you'll keep bumping into out in the world, in failed relationships, burned out careers, patterns that keep repeating no matter how hard you try to change. So now you might be wondering, how do I even know what's unconscious in me? Well, a good place to start is with what triggers you. Pay attention to the people who make you really angry or uncomfortable. Often, they're reflecting something you've disowned in yourself. That person who's too loud, too confident, too selfish. Maybe they're showing you a part of you that you were taught to suppress. Same goes for envy. If someone's success makes you irritated, not inspired, that's not just jealousy. That could be your potential, buried and unclaimed, trying to get your attention. Another big clue? The stories you keep telling yourself. I'm not good enough. I always mess things up. No one really sees me. Those aren't just passing thoughts. They're clues. They point to old wounds, limiting beliefs, inner blocks. And if you follow those clues with compassion, not judgment, you start reconnecting with the parts of yourself that have been lost or silenced. One more important tool Jung talked about: dreams. He believed that dreams are direct messages from the unconscious. They're full of metaphors, symbols, weird stuff that might not make sense right away, but they carry meaning. If you start paying attention to your dreams, writing them down, asking questions before sleep, you can begin to form a dialogue with the parts of you that don't speak in words. Here's the thing though, this process, this healing, it's not quick. It's not a one-and-done transformation. You don't wake up tomorrow magically motivated, aligned, and at peace. This isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming whole. Real motivation, lasting energy, doesn't come from constantly pushing yourself. It comes from inner alignment. When the part of you that wants to move forward isn't fighting the part that's still hurting. When your goals don't feel like pressure, but like truth. And yeah, sometimes we fake it. We slap affirmations on top of old wounds. We build perfect routines that we quietly sabotage. We say we're chasing purpose, but it still feels hollow. That's not healing. That's performance. Real growth happens when you can say, I don't fully understand what's going on inside me, but I'm willing to find out. That right there, that's real power. And now we come to one of Jung's most surprising ideas, that even your suffering, the confusion, the stuckness, the burnout has meaning. It's not just something to push through, it's a signal. It's your unconscious saying, stop. Look here, something inside you matters. When you can start to see that, everything changes. Let's go deeper now into something Jung believed was the core of real transformation. He called it individuation. Don't worry, that word sounds more complicated than it is. At its heart, individuation is about becoming your true self, not just the version of you that others expect, not the polished identity you present to the world, but the whole you, your strengths, your flaws, your past, your potential, all of it. It's not about self-improvement in the way we usually think, like fixing flaws or becoming more successful. It's about something much more powerful, becoming whole. Jung believed that deep down, we all carry a kind of inner map, a blueprint for who we're meant to be, but most people never follow it. Why? Because we're taught from a young age to fit in, not to explore who we really are. Think about it. As kids, we're told things like, don't be so sensitive. Stop asking so many questions. That's not realistic. Just do what you're told. Bit by bit, we learn to hide the parts of ourselves that feel too much, too different, too inconvenient. And in doing that, we lose touch with who we really are. We become someone the world will accept, but not someone we feel at home with. That's why so many people look successful on the outside, but feel empty or disconnected on the inside. Because something inside them knows, this isn't really me. And here's the thing, when we stray too far from our inner truth, the psyche starts to rebel. It sends signals like anxiety, depression, exhaustion, frustration, not to punish us, but to wake us up. Those uncomfortable feelings, they're alarms. They're the soul's way of saying, hey, you've wandered off track. This is the heart of the limbo we've been talking about. You're not broken. You're not lazy. You're in the middle of something. You're in a transition between who you thought you were and who you really are underneath. And the shift happens when you stop asking, what should I be doing? And start asking, who am I? Really, not the role, not the title, not the checklist version of you, but the deeper you. So how do we actually start the process of individuation? There are a few key steps Jung laid out. First, you have to withdraw your projections. Let me explain. We all tend to project our own unconscious stuff onto other people. Like when you admire someone so much, it feels almost obsessive, or when someone drives you crazy for no clear reason. Usually, those reactions are showing you parts of yourself that you've disowned. The person you idolize might reflect the courage or creativity you've buried. The person you hate might reflect a power or confidence you were told was bad. When you realize this, you can start to pull those projections back. And in doing that, you're reclaiming little pieces of your soul that you unknowingly gave away. Second, you have to confront the persona. The persona is basically the mask we wear to fit into the world. It's the version of you that gets the job, keeps the peace, plays the role. And look, it's not evil. We need a persona. But the problem comes when you start confusing the mask for the real you. When you get stuck in the role and forget the human underneath. The more rigid your persona becomes, the more disconnected you feel. The goal here isn't to destroy the mask. It's to see it for what it is, a tool, not your identity. Third, you have to face the shadow. Yep, back to the shadow. But now, it's not just something sabotaging you. It's something that can empower you. The shadow doesn't just hold pain. It holds potential, repressed creativity, buried strength, clarity you didn't know you had. When you stop running from it and start listening to it, it becomes one of your greatest allies. Jung compared this process to a hero's journey. You go down into the darkness, but you come back with treasure. You come back with yourself. And finally, you have to listen to the self, not the ego, not the inner critic. The self, with a capital S, it's the center of who you are. It's your inner guide. It's the part of you that's been quietly whispering through dreams, synchronicities, gut feelings, and deep longings. To hear it, you have to get quiet. You have to tune out the noise of expectations and performance. And when you do, you start to hear what your life is really asking of you, not what the world wants, but what you want at the deepest level. And just to be clear, individuation doesn't mean isolating yourself or becoming some kind of lone wolf. It's not about leaving the world behind. It's the opposite. As you become more whole inside, you become more capable of connection, of love, of purpose. You're not performing anymore. You're showing up as your real self, and people can feel the difference. But here's the honest truth. This journey is hard. It's not all light and insight. Sometimes it hurts, a lot, because becoming whole means letting go of who you thought you were. And that can feel like dying, like losing everything you've built your identity around. But on the other side of that is freedom, not becoming someone new, but finally being who you've always been underneath all the noise. Let's talk about something that hits deep for a lot of people. This constant search for purpose. Ever feel like you're always chasing something? Some bigger goal, some perfect path, some version of your life where everything finally clicks. You're doing all the right things, maybe even making progress, but deep down, you still feel off, like something's missing. Jung believed this is because most people are chasing a version of purpose that comes from the ego, not the self. See, the ego loves clarity. It wants certainty. It wants a job title, a mission, a 5-year plan. But the soul, the self, it speaks a different language. It moves in rhythms, not roadmaps. It doesn't care about success in the way we've been taught to measure it. It cares about wholeness, about truth, about alignment. And that's why so many people burn out chasing a dream that doesn't actually belong to them. We pick up these stories early in life. You have to do something impressive. You need to make your parents proud. Don't waste your potential. Success looks like money, status, productivity. So we chase. We hustle. We build lives that look great from the outside, while something inside us slowly fades out. And eventually, The psyche pushes back. That's when the anxiety kicks in, the confusion, the why doesn't this feel like enough moments. That's the self stepping in and saying, hey, this isn't it. You're off track. Jung called this tension the call to individuation, the pull to stop living someone else's life and start living your own. But here's what makes this so tricky. The moment you stop chasing the ego's version of success, things get messy. You feel lost. You doubt yourself. You question everything. That's normal. In fact, Jung said that's a sign you're actually waking up. That uncomfortable middle ground. That's the space between old identity and true self. The ego calls it failure. The soul calls it beginning. So what do you do when you're in that space? First, slow down. Really, this is one of the hardest things for driven people to accept. But the stillness, the waiting, the lack of motivation, it's not a problem. It's a pause for integration. It's your inner system saying, I need a minute to catch up with everything that's shifting. Second, stop trying to figure it all out with your mind alone. Jung believed that deep change happens through symbols, images, feelings, not just logic. That means paying attention to your inner world, listening to your dreams, noticing the patterns in your life. What keeps repeating? What keeps pulling you, even if it doesn't make sense? And here's a big one. Don't force clarity. True purpose isn't something you chase. It's something that emerges when you start living in alignment, when you stop betraying yourself, when you stop performing and start being honest about what you love, what you fear, what you really want. And that means, yes, letting go of old identities. Sometimes the hardest part of becoming who you are is saying goodbye to who you thought you were supposed to be. But you don't need to have it all figured out. You just need to be present enough to notice what your life is trying to show you. So let me ask you, what have you been forcing that no longer feels true? What have you been running from that actually holds the key to your next step? And what if this whole period of limbo isn't a detour, but the exact doorway you need to walk through? Because once you stop resisting the in-between, something powerful starts to happen. You begin to trust your own timing. You stop chasing answers and start listening to your life. You become less obsessed with being on track and more committed to being in tune. And that's the beginning of real peace. Not the fake kind where everything looks perfect, but the deep kind where your actions finally match your truth. So no, you're not lazy. You're not broken. You're waking up. And waking up takes time. Let's end with the insight Jung believed was the most powerful of all, the one that can shift everything if you really let it in. You're not here to become someone else. You're here to remember who you already are. Now that might sound poetic or even a little abstract, but sit with it for a second, because it changes the whole game. Most of us spend our lives trying to fix ourselves, trying to become better, smarter, more productive, more lovable, more impressive. Like we're constantly climbing this invisible ladder, hoping one day we'll finally feel like enough. But Jung saw it differently. He believed real transformation doesn't come from adding more. It comes from taking away what's not really you. The roles, the masks, the conditioning, the stories you were told about who you had to be. You don't need to become someone else. You need to come home to yourself. And here's what's wild. Once you stop trying so hard to chase a version of yourself that was never really yours, your energy returns. Your motivation comes back, not forced, not hyped, but naturally, because you're finally moving in alignment with your soul, not your programming. That's what Jung meant by individuation. It wasn't just psychology, it was deeply spiritual, not religious, but sacred. The soul's journey to wholeness. He believed each of us carries a blueprint inside, a true self that's always been there, waiting. And the suffering, the stuckness, the confusion, that's not failure. That's the signal that something deeper is trying to break through. But here's the part most people miss. This process doesn't need outside permission. You don't need someone else to validate it. You don't need to deserve it. You don't need to have it all together. What you need is inner permission. Permission to slow down. Permission to stop pretending. Permission to not have the answers. Permission to feel what you've been avoiding. Permission to fall apart so you can rebuild from truth. That's the radical gift of integration. It frees you from the endless pressure to earn your worth. It reveals that you were already enough, already whole, already home. You just forgot, and now you're remembering. So many people are stuck in a cycle of striving, chasing purpose, chasing clarity, chasing worth, but they're looking in the wrong place. They're looking out there when the answers have always been in here. And here's the paradox Jung leaves us with. You can't become your true self by trying harder to be someone you're not. So if you're feeling stuck right now, if you're in that limbo between who you've been and who you're becoming, it's not because you're failing. It's because the false self is dissolving and the real self is rising. And yes, it's messy, it's confusing, it's often painful, but it's also sacred. Because what's unfolding is a life that's finally yours. Jung said we must descend before we rise. And that descent, the breakdown, the stillness, the falling apart, isn't the end. It's the beginning. And here's the beautiful truth. Once you've seen who you really are, even for a moment, you can't unsee it. You may forget, you may fall, but something inside you stays awake. And that awareness, it becomes your compass for life. So take a breath with me. Really, just pause for a second. Ask yourself, what old version of me am I finally ready to let go of? What am I pretending not to feel? What if my deepest confusion isn't a problem, but a portal? Because you don't need to find motivation. You need to reconnect with your center. You don't need to chase purpose. You need to listen to what your soul has been whispering all along. You don't need to fight the limbo. You need to understand it. And when you do, everything begins to shift. The resistance softens, the clarity returns, and you move. Not from pressure, but from peace. So where do you go from here? You don't need a 30-day plan or a dramatic life overhaul. You begin with presence, a few minutes of silence, a little more honesty, a little more space to feel what arises, these small, quiet moments. They're the doorway to everything. Remember this, the most powerful journey you'll ever take is inward. As Jung said, who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes. You have the map now. You're not lost. You're just between chapters. And this space right here might just be the most powerful place you'll ever stand. So will you keep chasing the version of you that never felt quite right? Or will you finally meet the version that's been waiting patiently underneath it all? You're not stuck. You're not broken. You're becoming. And your true life starts now.